Okay, hi and welcome back to Carl and Rick Talk Risk. Uh, and we have another guest, Andrea. Do you want to quickly introduce yourself before we get going?
Thanks a lot for inviting me, Carl and Rick. I'm Dr. Andrea Calef, Assistant Professor Education in Finance at UCL School of Management in London.
Perfect. Yeah, and Andrea, just so that the audience knows how we all know each other, you've written for Premier Intelligent Risk in the past, and then we've gotten to know each other and met at conferences since then. So it's very nice to have you on. And I think we're going to discuss a topic I think that's near and dear to all of our hearts, uh, AI in the classroom and in the workplace. But I got an article, and I'll share it in the show notes. I just want to read a little bit of it because it is behind a paywall. Not everybody will be able to access it. And I thought it was very interesting. A survey of UK undergraduates by the Higher Education Policy Institute think tank shows 92% of students are using generative AI in some form this year, compared with 66% last year, while 88% have used it in assessments, up from 53% last year. That's nearing 100% use by students in university courses. My first question to both of you, since you're both professors, can you tell the difference between a student written paper and an AI generated paper?
First off, I'll say that 8% of the students, i.e. the 8% that didn't use AI, didn't understand the question, didn't understand the survey question.
You think it's 100?
It's pretty darn close to 100.
Yeah.
It totally depends on, your question about whether or not you can understand whether it's written by AI or not. It totally depends upon what the assessment is or what you're looking at. To be quite frank, on almost a weekly basis, AI is getting better at passing the Turing test. Okay. The number one way that you know that's AI is it's actually better quality than the students would normally do on their own.
But assuming you've got a baseline of the students writing, if it's always written AI, you don't have that baseline anymore.
Yeah, but even though my background's in industry, I've still been in one way, shape, or form teaching at the graduate level since, and I'm going to give away my age here, but since the early 90s.
Right.
And so, you basically have a 35-year track record there of assessing, graduate level work. So,
yeah.
Andrea, what's your experience?
Thank you for asking. So there are different ways to use AI. There is clearly the generative AI, there is the assistive AI, and there are those few now probably that are not using AI at all. And what you can notice is that quite often there is an accent writing eloquence that doesn't really mimic the verbal one. That is already quite quite a surprise, I would say, when there is this huge difference. And it really depends on the assessment type, of course. If you ask them to use their critical thinking, so to think about and elaborate, then it's more likely that you will find students going out of the tangent, so not addressing the question as Rick was mentioning, and you will find many more commonalities across the scripts. So in a few words, you see that they are much more similar. There is less originality as well. So there are, I think, quite few hints that can help you understand whether how much AI has been used or not.
There's something else that we have to put into place here, I think, with your specific question that not a lot of people realize or think about. First off, graduate B school management education has kind of undergone a big change in the last 20 years. Okay, first off, particularly since COVID, the amount of virtual learning, and I'll use learning writ large there, has increased dramatically. Secondly, the size of classes has changed dramatically. Third, the number of professors coming from industry has dropped dramatically. Uh, and so all of those mean that, and that's brought several changes. So much more management management education is much more objective now, much less subjective, because you can't have a professor do, for example, a Socratic case method if they've never actually worked in industry before. It simply doesn't work. Okay, you can't teach by the Socratic method if you've never actually been there and done it, and all of your knowledge is from a textbook. Secondly, because of all those changes, particularly during COVID and because of COVID, academic integrity has gone down the tubes. There is actually a quite large cheating industry created that boomed during COVID, and the real revolution of AI in education has actually been that's destroyed, for sake of argument, it's destroyed the cheating industry, the higher education cheating industry. So it's not that AI per se is changing things directly. It is, but it's just replacing the cheating industry and the whole distributed learning revolution that we had, which obviously, hit the gas pedal hard during COVID. So having said that, the effects of it are still dramatic, in my opinion.
A case in point there is Chegg, Chegg in the United States, which I've never actually used it, but a lot of students use their forums, and they get a lot of they used to get a lot of homework help from Chegg, and they're pretty much going out of business now. Because AI, right? I mean, AI can assist with all that stuff. Why do you need to pay for a service to assist you? Something the article got into a little bit. For the sake of argument, the author says, well, why not just let students use AI? What's the big deal? They're going to use it in the workplace anyway. So the lean in approach. But in the experience that she lays out there, when that's been tried in the classroom, and you give students text written by AI, they cannot substantially change the text. They can polish a couple of words, they can put it in their own language, but the critical thinking to actually say, I don't quite buy that argument, or that's not the argument I would make, that goes out the window. It's cosmetic at that point, because basically the students are editing the first draft of AI. At least that's how I see it. Whereas if you really want students to develop critical thinking skills, they have to make the first draft and then possibly use AI after that to assist them.
If I can jump in, I think that you're fully right. So critical thinking gets more and more important, especially in the AI area. We all know about biases, misconceptions, and even mistakes that are present in generative AI. It is moving very quickly, that's true, but these problems are still present. So the over-reliance on AI may simply lead students being blind somewhat, not thinking and getting everything for granted. The reality is that we live in a complex world that is evolving and changing very rapidly, and the only way to survive in that world is to use your critical thinking. So it may be appropriate to teach students how to use it and to use it in a good way, but before you need to make sure that you have the basic critical thinking knowledge to be able to do that, which means that you need to study, to practice, learn even various theories, and so on and so forth. And then once that you will be guided, you may be ready to use AI in a critical way.
I think again, there's another way to look at this, and that's the role of the professor. Perhaps I'm just old school and should be, taken out to the backyard and shot, but the role of professor has changed dramatically in higher education as well. Okay, as I've already said, class sizes has changed dramatically, et cetera, et cetera. PowerPoint has taken over. The number of professors who read PowerPoints has increased dramatically. And, hey, if you're given a class of 400 students, you can't have discussions with them. And it's basically led to mass market assembly line education, which is very, very, very hard to get critical thinking. Critical thinking is an individual exercise. So we've seen the rise in business schools of group projects, and group projects are very, very valuable because business is working in groups. But if we're completely honest, and I'll speak for the several schools that I've been associated with and am associated with, and actually I won't speak for the schools I'm associated with. I should put that. I could see the dean screaming down my throat. But if we're perfectly honest, group work has been a way to ease the professor workload as our workload has changed. Rubrics, we are basically forced to use rubrics. Rubrics basically guarantee that you have assessments that are anti-critical thinking. Rubrics force are an admission that you're giving knowledge-based rather than understanding and critical thinking-based assessments. And students aren't idiots. If we're going to have bots do hiring, and a major component of the input to a bot of your initial screening and even your initial interview is grades, which, by the way, we know students with the very top grades statistically underperform in real life. But if we're going to use that, then students aren't idiots. They're going to go for the grades, and they're going to, basically follow the bouncing ball and fill in the rubric. And guess what? AI is far better at filling in a rubric, simply because AI is not going to get bored at filling in a rubric and, go brain dead filling in a rubric like any intelligent student would. And so PowerPoint and rubrics are killing discussion in the classroom. And in my opinion, again, perhaps I should be taken out and shot because I'm such an old fart and so out of date. But without discussion in the classroom, without students having to think on their feet, without students having to debate, the decline of the Socratic method, which was the number one method historically of B school education, we're getting to a knowing versus thinking. And in my mind, knowledge is a complete, unmitigated, almost totally valueless commodity when I can ask Alexa or ChatGPT and get an answer that's going to be 99% correct 99% of the time instantaneously. It's the ability to connect dots that are far away that is important. It's the ability to think different. I'll go back to Peter Thiel's question. What is it that you believe that most people disagree with you on? Being able to answer questions like that is absolutely key. And we don't get that with PowerPoint. We don't get that with rubrics. We don't get that with 400 student sized classes.
So the teaching method
and distance learning.
Yeah. So the way we deliver education has made itself vulnerable to AI in a way, right?
Oh,
if
absolutely.
It was more Socratic, it wouldn't be as vulnerable, right? We wouldn't be going through this. I want to play devil's advocate for a second. I'm thinking back to my high school, and we didn't use laptops in class, by the way. I'm not that young. But I remember a lot of my classmates cheating on exams, especially, big exams where, a lot was riding on it, and you, this is your chance to get into university. And I remember people scrolling notes on their legs, and I mean, just the creativity with which people cheated was amazing. And if you didn't do it, there was a fear of missing out. There was a fear that, oh my God, I'm not gonna do as well in the exam, which is ridiculous now, I know, but still, a lot of classmates tried to cheat. And if I look now, a lot of them are doing perfectly well in their careers. At some point, they figured out that, okay, I need to put my head down. I need to do this. I need to do that. Yeah, this is how I get to where I want to go. Are we making a fuss about AI? Are students going to figure it out for themselves that, okay, you know what? This is actually not getting me to where I want to go. And this is just a fad that is going to pass away in a couple of years. What do you guys think?
That's an interesting question. Probably your friends have already developed the critical thinking. They simply wanted to minimize the effort and maximize the outcome, which is something that is actually happening even with the current generation of students. So there is perhaps no surprise in that. But they were already having enough background to acknowledge that they would have needed something more than just simply cheating. But you need to develop that over time, in my opinion. So that is something relevant. When I speak with my students, the key aspect that I always check is their critical thinking. Rick is very right. Lectures now are very much packed, and that's for that reason tutorials and seminars in which the classroom is split in multiple groups works much better to develop discussions and making connections and implications, which is what help students critical thinking learning. So I'm somewhat still optimistic that if as educators we do a good job, we will have to change the ways. Certainly the assessment pattern will have to change quite dramatically with respect to what we did during COVID and right after COVID. Probably we will have to go back to something more traditional examinations, oral examinations, so on and so forth. But the point is that we cannot stop innovation, and there is nothing we can do with that. So we need to take the best of it.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get me wrong. I'm a huge fan of AI, and I think that in education we need to lean into it. But Carl, what you were saying about your colleagues, it reminds me of, I forget who said it, I think it was Bill Gates. If you want something done, give it to the laziest person, because if they're halfway intelligent, they'll think of the quickest way and the easiest way to get it done. And while I do not condone cheating per se, um, uh, that's just basically someone who is adaptable to their circumstances. And again, getting back, I'm going to beat my one horse repeatedly, but to systems view of things, um, with AI is swallowing up the complicated world. And it's the people who are adaptable, who can deal with the complexity, can deal with the VUCA world, that are going to be the successful ones. So, hey, um, I, as I say, I encourage my students to use AI. Having said that, I am going to call them out in class, and they're going to have to randomly present their stuff, and they know that, and they know that they'll be nailed to the wall if they can't explain it.
Yeah. Rick, that reminds me about something you posted on LinkedIn this week, about tech founders.
Oh, STEAM versus STEM?
Yeah, related to that. Yeah. But the original article you posted was about tech founders turning around and saying, once they have kids, saying, well, you know what? I'm not sure you should get into programming. I'm not sure you should get into tech, but actually encouraging their kids to go into the trades, go into creative fields, go into less fields less vulnerable to AI. And not in that article, but somewhere else, I've read recently about how shop class is coming back in a big way, and that students are really signing up to it. I don't know whether it's because the job market is shifting towards we don't have enough of the trades, or because maybe some students really want to work with their hands again and not have such a digitalized education. Yeah, what did you want to share anything more about that?
First off, I could go off for 4 hours on this. I want to recommend the book Shop Class at Soulcraft, and I apologize, I cannot remember who wrote it. It's about 20 years old, but man, that is a book that, first off, deals directly to your point and is 100% bang on for this generation. So perhaps when you post this, you can post a link to the book. Ironically, I used to run a book club for the alumni of Dalhousie University, and that was one of the first books that we had as our book of the month selection. It's a great book. But again, it deals with the fact that as AI takes over all the complicated bits, it's the human bits, the complex bits, that are left over. And the article that I reposted was from actually the Wall Street Journal. And it wasn't so much that students should go into the arts or the trades because they were going to be job proof. Mm-hmm. Is mainly to develop the ancillary skills that weren't being captured by the PowerPoint, that went beyond the PowerPoint, that went beyond the rubrics, that went beyond the multiple choice exams. And it's because those are the skills that are critical. Like right now, learning Python, in my opinion, is silly. I used to be heavy into programming. I just did a couple of major programs in Python. I never learned Python. I basically put it in ChatGPT, wrote up the algorithm and the prompts for ChatGPT. Within a day, I had my 2 programs done. Yes, I appropriately tested them to make sure, I wasn't getting hallucinations. The program worked perfect. Why the heck would I learn Python? I already know 6 other computer languages. Why add a 7th? When literally within a day, not only can I look like I mastered a computer language, but actually get what I need it done. Yeah. It's silly. Yep. Yes, there's table stakes, and yes, you need to understand the basics of languages, but understanding a specific language, a specific computer language is silly. Now, put that into human languages. I'll take poetry. Okay, I'm not exactly sure I want ChatGPT to do my translation to fully appreciate poetry written in a different language other than, my mother tongue. And again, that's the difference between the complicated and the complex, the objective versus the subjective, the the nuanced versus the, no nuance.
Yeah. Yeah. Andrea, anything to add on that that there could be a swing back from so many students using AI and feeling like they're missing out on some of these more hands-on topics or more creative skills that just aren't there anymore?
There is an interesting trend, especially among the youngest generations, those that are digitally native, those that have been raised in cities, actually to go out, to go in the countryside and do also some rural work. So there is the possibility that it's not just AI and digitalized world, there is the whole society that somewhat doesn't give necessarily the outcome that this younger part of this younger generation would like to have. So they go back to something more traditional, older, and this requires clearly using their own hands and all the other subjects that perhaps have been overlooked more recently, because in the last decades we have been pushing quite a lot for scientific and especially art sciences topics. And now they go back to something that is more humanistic, and so that's not a big surprise at all. I don't know whether this trend will continue or not, and that's the beauty of being living in a world that is keeping on changing and leaves you with many surprises. Yeah, you can try to forecast, you can use LM models and so on and so forth, but eventually the realized outcome can be very different.
Yeah, it is funny because Rick, you mentioned poetry, and I can simulate my thinking right now. If I read a really nice poem and then I found out that it's written by AI, I would be terribly disappointed. But if I found out it's written by a person, I would immediately relate to the feelings behind it and what that person might have been going through. It's funny how yeah, instinctively we sort of know that I don't know. It's very cold. Its output. It's
Yeah, but see, that's where you and I differ. Okay, my background's in physics, so I am cold.
Okay.
Automon to begin with. So if a poem or a piece of music or a piece of acting speaks to me, I really don't give a flying flip of a rolling donut whether it's AI or human. Now,
Okay.
when I want to react with someone, I want that to be a human. Okay. But in terms of, music, I I've written before about Wendy Carlos's music. Okay. And Wendy Carlos, for those of you who aren't familiar, uh, um, was one of the very early computer music pioneers. Wrote and did a series of albums. Probably most famous was Switched on Bach, which she redid a lot of classical music, albeit for the computer. And the thing is, it's perfect. Okay? And so when you listen to it, it is absolutely awesome. But for about 10 minutes. Then after 10 minutes, you want to put your $50,000 stereo system into the lake because it's freaking perfect. Okay? And so the beauty of life, in my opinion, long term, is the imperfections of humans. Now, perhaps I have to do that because I'm so bloody imperfect myself. Okay, so it's kind of natural that I would embrace that. But it's the imperfections of humans that in large part define us, but also it's the imperfection of humans that lead to creativity, that lead to discoveries, that lead to paradigm shifts, which is why the leading AI models, of course, do instill randomness, is to try to mimic that. But, the stupidity of humans is very hard to mimic, and the imperfections of humans is very hard to mimic. But having said that, I really don't care if a great piece of poetry or a great piece of writing or a great piece of music or a great piece of acting is AI generated or not.
Okay. Yeah, we might differ there because I feel like I'll have to test myself because I haven't actually run the experiment. All I know is this conversation would not have been as much fun with AI.
Actually, I got to interrupt you there. Sorry, Andrea, I'm jumping in way too often here. But as we're having this discussion, I was thinking, wouldn't it be cool if we actually did a second session that was actually replicate this, but 100% AI?
Replicate
Notebook
us.
LM, and we will see the outcome.
Yeah.
We'll see who listens to which one gets more listeners. That'll be the test. Well, I know we're at time. thank you very much for chatting about this. I know it fascinates all of us, so it's nice to see where the conversation goes. Until next time. Cheers.
Have fun, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.